I'm doing
How's life treating you?
pretty good. Rainy day in London.
Ah, it happens to the best of us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Talk to me about being the fastest exited founder in Europe, my friend. Project
Y-
Lovable must have been a blast. I know it was a couple of weeks ago, but every time I come across that line, I sit here in awe.
Yeah. So like the gang and I were basically doing a lot of hackathons in the past 6 months, and all of us have previously won in plenty different of like aspects of rewards. And then we thought one big, I guess, blocker that we always had is that all these projects, they always just remain on GitHub. They never go anywhere else. And we thought how cool it could be if we do something that is very different for this one. Like if we actually take a company and sell it or build something that is actually monetizable. And yeah, we did it. We sort of went really big. We thought it kind of matches the whole theme of the hackathon, 20 hours, 20 VC. So might as well call it a 20-hour company. And yeah, since then it was quite a wild one. There's been a lot of inbounds, a lot of people really excited about it, asking if we are available for other projects within 20 hours. So
I love it. Going in, I want to talk strategy on hackathons before we kind of get into the meat of the conversation we're going to have today because there's so much with you. Honestly, I think we can go down the route of quant trading, gaming, poker, Unicorn Mafia, and all. But strategy when it comes to hackathons, when we're thinking about how do I build an Avengers team that's more than likely to win? Who do you bring on? Obviously, Charlie was there. You've got there was Charlie, there was Luke for the Lovable hackathons. Do you need complementary members of the team? Do you look for just alphas? How do you build a strategy for winning hacks?
I guess we're quite lucky in a sense that we have found a community here in London of extremely talented developers who just like doing hackathons. So every time there is a hackathon, we literally have a group channel for it, and we have tens and almost like hundreds of people that are usually very inclined to participate. So you just form teams with whatever skills you need for that particular challenge that you're trying to tackle. But there's always quite a lot of very interested people. So I like to shuffle. I believe that most people within our community are very high signal, very high quality. So I've never had a problem with teaming up with someone and finding out how good they are on the job, I guess.
Oh, so you go into it sometimes cold of like, I know you're good for it because you're in the community. Let's just rip and win this thing.
Yeah, so this one, for instance, was kind of like that. So I've worked with Charlie in the past, I've worked with Henry, but I didn't work with Leo or Luke. This was sort of like my first time meeting them, really. I knew them from the group chat, but I've never met them in person. So, kind of only saw on the community, but it turned out to be quite great. So,
We talk a lot about the traits of great founders, right? But I think the traits of an engineer and great engineers, the people that make up the team are equally as important. You spend a lot of time in those group chats with some of the most cracked engineers in London, in the UK, in Europe potentially. What do you look for in people that get accepted into the group that are very high signal?
mostly hunger, people who are driven by real mission, whatever that mission is, and the reason that they have that hunger is sort of very difficult to determine a lot of the times. But you kind of need to have that spark because a lot of people nowadays are just builders for the sake of building. They're thinking, oh, it's easier than my day job. But we're looking for people that have that a bit of an extra quirk where they actually want to do what they're doing and they have almost like a calling, like I have a problem to solve kind of methodology.
I like it. I think engineers are in demand more than ever before. This idea that vibe coding is going to kill off the engineer is just out of this world, right? It just
Yeah,
gives more
I
people
agree.
access. Do you vibe code? Do you sit there sometimes with cursor and just riff?
I don't use cursor a lot. I used cursor in the past. Now I'm more of like a Claude code person or
Oh,
amp
he
code.
likes that command line, does he?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I do quite a lot. It helps in various challenges, especially when you tackle a problem that you probably never faced before. So in the past, you would have to go to Google, Stack Overflow, or ask a bunch of people and hope that you're going to find an answer. And now you have, kind of like an IDE that helps you with everything. So I use it very often, but I do like to sort of like fact check. If I get to do something that I have no clue, and I see that Claude is fixing it and it's somehow working, I would still probably go on YouTube and try to figure out like how is it actually going to work? What's happening under the hood that I don't understand? But the cool thing is with vibe coding is that you become sort of more proficient in languages that you've never tackled before. So I used to only work with like Python projects, and now I do things with, everything from TypeScript to front end. And I'm getting quite good at it, so it's nice.
What about the back end? How do you feel about vibe coding with backends yet? Is it just not there? I know MCP servers are still in its sort of infancy, but in time, do you believe that the front end, the ease that we've got to, is going to be as easy as the back end?
I think if you know your backend infrastructure, vibe coding really works for backend. So it's like it depends. Because if you know exactly what you're doing and you're just architecting with an agent to create code for you, then it's very powerful. But the problem is that most people expect it to work like in the front end interface where I can just like explain very simple things without logic and you would get it. But the problem is that if the explanation is poor, the output's going to be poor.
It's so true, right? I think they can still hallucinate in a way that obviously doesn't isn't always great, but sometimes the hallucination is exactly what you want or something outside of the box. And so it's not a bug, it's actually something that works. Hey, we've talked a little bit about Lovable, we talked a little bit about strategy. What do you do outside of just winning hacks across Europe?
Yeah, quite a lot of things. I run a consultancy. So the focus is on sort of how can we disrupt secondary market. Um, as you know, like my thesis for life right now is that the game of public stocks is kind of finished. I think the future is something that is a bit less regulated, like secondary markets and pre-seed startups. And this is why I've been very bullish on what Europe is going to build in the next 10 years. So I'm building in that space. I work with a lot of family offices, some venture capital firms, where we're trying to see how can we disrupt that space. As you can imagine, like a lot of platforms, so like due diligence, scouting, sourcing, all of that.
Talk to me about the thesis. Why do you believe that public markets are cooked?
I think like any good thing, like when the masses come to do the same thing, and also we have to think of who controls public markets and where's the big money comes from, right? So you have like huge hedge funds. I'm a quant myself, so I've seen this from both scenarios where you can be a very good trader and still you don't really have a shot at taking down like someone big like BlackRock when you're doing trading on a daily basis, right? So it's a very heavy market to come into in 2025, whereas secondary market right now is a very small in comparison market of companies that a lot of people assume will go public. But in reality, most of them are not even intending to do that, right? So I think there's a lot of work that can happen in this sort of like phase between secondary to maybe IPO, maybe not, and how people can, I guess, make quite a lot of money through that.
I want to touch on your first point. When you look at it, sort of the GameStop scenario in the Wall Street bets community, sort of getting behind that brand, what do you say to that? In that the hedge funds can't win, but the consumers can.
What do you mean with the GameStop scenario?
With the GameStop scenario, well, specifically, right? They were betting against the hedge funds, right? They didn't want
Yeah,
them to short GameStop. In that case, don't you think the public markets win? They do the right thing. They make sure that GameStop stays alive.
I think I'm not sure if it worked that way though, because you had a pump of money into the stock that eventually did kind of save the company that was kind of trembling. But it's a very unique use case that was essentially only big because of the hype. Like it didn't happen with any other company. And if we see more like recent IPLs like Figma, these are not really the signals that the market's giving. And then when we look at, the United States, like if we put it aside and we look at Europe as a whole, and we think of like what companies do we have here potentially that can go IPO, and we know that they're going to go to the United States. They're not even going to do it here. And then the second they go there, they compete against like this whole swarm of American companies. It's logistically very outdated, in my opinion. I think there is smarter ways of ensuring companies becoming successful. And there is also like a limit of scale, I think, that some companies are comfortable at reaching. And the second they breach that, it just becomes this, almost like unaccomplishable race. Like how many Amazons and Google are we going to have in 50 years from now?
How many do you think?
I don't think that many. So that's the thing. It's either we're going to have like one very big company that sort of buys everything and just controls the world, or you're going to have a lot of very smaller ones. I hope it's the latter because that's the whole purpose of innovation, right? That's why people go to places like Y Combinator and see very small startups that accomplish, I guess, change way faster than huge corporates like Amazon or Google do. But yeah, it's a gamble. We don't really know.
Can you break down secondaries for me? What does it mean, and why is it important that that the VCs and private offices understand what this is?
Well, VCs and private offices understand what it is. The problem is that the general population has no clue, right? Most VCs right now are deep into the secondaries game. Some are even raising secondary funds. So they raise millions of dollars just to invest in companies like Endural, Anthropic, SpaceX. So they buy and they sell, right? And they do that under very different valuations than you would see in the stock market because it's based on a lot of other metrics. Um, I think it has a lot of potential once, well, right now it runs through SPV models, right? If a person like myself or like yourself wants to get into secondary market, usually we don't have 50 to $100 million to just go in and dump into a company like Anthropic
I mean,
to
maybe you
convince
will
them
with
that
the amount of hacks that you start doing, but hey, us on ventures, maybe not just yet.
right, hopefully. But since we don't, the only way to sort of like go forward is through an SPV, right? So we're gonna have like a vehicle with like hundreds of people that are giving away 50K, 100K each, and then we can give a competitive piece to a company like Anthropic or Lovable to have them consider us on their cap table,
Hmm.
right? I think this market is very disruptible though, because I think now more and more companies that are becoming big are looking at crowdfunding solutions, not necessarily just raising through VC, especially when you are a company in the scale of Lovable. You don't actually need a name anymore, or raise 16Z to help you to pump yourself up to investors. You're hot. Like the whole world wants to support you. So for you, it's more about getting the best deal possible for yourself and having the right amount of money. So I think there is a great opportunity there to see how we can connect these worlds.
That secondaries market, do you feel that more and more people will start crowdfunding through that?
It already happens. I don't think I've seen as many SPVs as this year for every company when they do their primary rounds. And you have like a lot of companies that are trying to target that specific niche, right? So it's not even a niche anymore. You have a lot of people that are saying out loud, I'm looking to invest in these companies. This is my budget.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Do you think that's happening more and more in Europe, or is that still happening more and more in the US?
It's actually a huge thing in Europe. I think this is kind of also almost our edge because we could really dominate the secondaries market. Whereas the US is already dominating, the post-IPO market. You go public in the US. But what if we could control the private ones?
Hey, we control the market before it even gets public. That's what the world we want to live in, right?
Precisely. Maybe it doesn't need to go public.
Oh,
Maybe the game can be different, right?
I imagine that. Imagine if we had $1 trillion company that was private.
We have plenty, I think, based on paper alone, like companies like SpaceX
Oh, but it's
are
not at a
performing
trillion dollar
exception.
valuation yet.
Well, what does all of that mean? Like, isn't everything just like lines of credits and bunch of papers? Like the
Agreed.
stock market, all of it is a bit of it's a facade. It's not legit,
Hey,
right?
it's
This
the
is why
biggest,
companies
it
like
is the
Tesla,
biggest game in town. That's all it is.
yeah, I agree.
Why do you think you're bullish on Europe? What is happening here that you truly believe in outside of just the secondaries work that you're doing?
I think the main thing is adversity. I think
What do you think that we have a
whenever you
chip
really
on our
struggle,
shoulder and like that's
yeah,
given us our edge?
yeah. I think after like as an individual, right, on a personal level, if life brings you down just like enough times, it's either you're gonna drown or you're gonna get up and do stuff to change it. And I think Europe is in a very pivotal moment where it kind of feels very tired. It's been a very, very hard decade. And we keep on hearing about how our neighbors across the sea are the best nation in the world and like they're doing so great in everything, in every aspect. And I think it makes people very hungry to do things differently. So you have more and more people doing things. And if you look just at the 5 years previous to this one alone, Europe has built more, I guess, unicorn valuated startups in the last 2, 3 years than they've done in the last 25, right? So there is a huge epidemic towards that sort of like excellence. And even in the US, when you see like a lot of very successful companies, a lot of them are European origin, right? So I think Europe has always been part of the game, always been a huge part of the game. It's just very difficult for us to comprehend that second, third place. But if you look at, I don't know, I think I've seen a really interesting stat lately about GitHub contributions.
Europe
And
is a significantly bigger than the US and many other
exactly. And
nations.
it's been this way for the past few years, right? So if
Mm.
you take Europe and the UK, we've already suppressed the US. But I think people are expecting to see the results of that like today. Innovation takes time, money takes time to grow. I think we're entering a very interesting decade globally, not just for Europe, but also for the United States. And powers can shift all the time, right? So I am quite bullish in Europe. I think talent is here. I think it's cheap enough and it's hungry enough to become excellent. So
I like it. I'm bullish on Europe too. That's why we do this show. What I would love to know is what have we got to do? We talked about why we're in this position, but what do you think that we've got to do collectively across the block to really put ourselves in, the first best foot forward, moving into this next decade, moving into this next century?
I mean, that's kind of this question leads directly to why we have Unicorn Mafia and why am I even here in London, where I've spent the last 7 years here. Originally from Israel, I've been in the US for about a year. I came here. I fell in love with this place, but it felt like nowhere near from the places that I've been in, like in terms of the startup scene in Tel Aviv compared to here or to New York or to San Francisco. It wasn't as good. But I think it's never been better. And I think what we need to do is to pump each other up, right? To do things that are excellent and create pioneering ideas and support each other, right? So we created Unicorn Mafia. Well, Charlie went to a hackathon about 6 months ago and met a bunch of really interesting people. And then he thought, I want to keep in touch with these people. How do I do that? Let's create a group chat, right? And that thing became this huge community that for us is almost like an internal Y Combinator. Like we give people the resources that they need if they're developers to become excellent. So if they need interest to investors, if they need compute, if they need office space, if they need support, technological support or infrastructure support, we have all of that,
Hmm.
right? So I think the point is that we're trying to help all these people to be the best versions they can of themselves, and I think that will accelerate Europe. So more of that kind of thing. I think hackathons, all the event space in London have never been greater. So I think Europe should also go into that direction of just having more and more stuff, right? You want to make sure that your weeks and months are packed with interesting things that will attract interesting people to get out of their comfort zone, leave their jobs after 6 p.m. and do something different. So yeah, more of that. I think it's already happening, but
Hey, look, one of the indicators I think is really great right now is like Luma events, as an example. We were talking about this on the show a couple of weeks ago. Right now, London is popping off. The block is doing incredibly well as well. Communities in Berlin, Paris, as an example. We need to get on par with New York and San Francisco, where there is just an overwhelming amount of events that are happening and there's motion. I think half of this is motion. We've just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, one step forward at a time. And really just, like you said, getting people out, getting people thinking differently, getting people in uncomfortable positions to be like, I'm going to take a bet and we're going to go and try and do this. And then there's communities like yours that sit there and support and say, hey, you have conviction, let's give you the resources at such an early stage.
yeah, I agree. I think we're in the right path. It needs to be more. If I compare London to any other place, I do think it's probably the best right now, except for maybe San Francisco, but then for a very specific reason, right? If it comes to like pre-seed and seed funding, and London is as competitive as San Francisco. When it comes to later stage, obviously the United States has an edge. But I think that gap can be bridged.
David, what are you getting up to outside of Unicorn Mafia and the quant trading then? Or the quant platform?
Um, what do you mean? just
So
like,
what do you get up to? Do you just hack your way through hackathons, like just for fun? Is that what you spend most of your days doing? Or
no,
do
I
you,
wish.
what is it more fun than building the secondaries platform?
Yeah, mostly I do consulting services. I work with a bunch of startups that help them to either build platforms, code them, or connect them with investors. So taking them to the next level. I do hackathons mostly for fun. Obviously, it's very competitive, so I'm a competitive person. I do have a vision that hackathons can become just like poker tournaments. So I'm coming from sports betting world. All my friends are in poker, and I've seen how hyped they get, when they go to a tournament, and it's game on, right? And everyone knows everyone. And I think the hackathon scene, at least here, it's becoming a bit like that. Like you always see familiar faces,
Mm.
and it's becoming more and more interesting. And I think the Project Lovable hackathon in particular, because it documented the whole thing. And we've seen there's like actually people interested in seeing that. So maybe there is an avenue there where hackathons can become almost like a competitive sport, because I think engineering has never been more interesting to the outsider, right? So if you're just a random person who knows nothing about coding, this now captures the same headlines as Ronaldo being purchased by a team, right? We have engineers being poached for 30, 50, $100 million, which shows that there is a lot of interest in that, in these type of people, this type of talent. So I think hackathons can be really huge. Um, we're trying to sort of change the game as well. We're going to do something really cool with hackathon space very soon, so stay tuned.
I like it. We always like breaking news. I was ready with the gong today just to bring out if we had any like serious breaking news. When that comes out, the gong's ready for you. Have no fear. Um, I really liked your point on the fact that there's sports betting around hackathons. In the run up to Project Lovable, I was asking the group chats around like who do you think is going to win. Uh, Charlie's name came up a lot, and if I had
Yeah,
money, I would have put it on him. I probably would have lost it, knowing the outcome.
yeah.
But now it's quite interesting. So when a hack comes along, and you guys are in it, Aaron's in it with Good Omen as an example, and some of the other teams, you sort of sit there and go, "Oh, I don't know. I'm gonna have to spread my bets."
Yeah. I mean, that's the cool thing, right? We should make this happen. I think hackathons becoming bigger and bigger, especially here in the community. I think this can scale outside of London and outside of the UK, outside of Europe, and all the way to the United States. And it attracts a lot of very good talent and a lot of interest, outside interest, at seeing how that talent can perform and what can they build.
It's quite interesting. I think Polymarket just a filter, or is it Kashi, a filter on the platform to be like hackathons, and then you can place bets on Unicorn Mafia as an example.
Yeah. Would you go Calshare or Poly Market? Which one would you
Oh
use?
God, I don't know. I've spent some time on Polymarket, so I like the vibes. Obviously, the boys over at TVPN have it as the ticker. Uh,
Yeah.
but hey, we can't have the same one as them, so we'll take the other one,
Yeah.
or we just build our own.
Yeah. Interesting one.
David, thanks so much for the time. We're looking forward to bringing you back on to tell us a little bit more about the news that's coming out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for
Thank
the
you very
time,
much.
my friend. Speak soon. Ciao, ciao. That that was